seen a few Let's Play series for Stardew Valley, and you know what they all have in common? They're misnomers. They're not actually a Let's Play. They're more like, I'm gonna do some gaming, then upload it to YouTube. Which is fine, but it's still a misnomer. Instead, what I'm gonna do is an actual Let's Play. Rather than me making every major decision, I'm gonna have you guys in the comments choose what I do. Let's put the Let's in Let's Play. So yeah, I'm gonna go through Stardew Valley, but you guys will be dictating my moves. Will we go JoJo or stay loyal to the community? What farm type will we choose? What cave will we do? How do we organize the chests with 70 million items in case anyone wants anything? You all will be the ones to help me decide that. This way, it's actually a Let's Play, not an I play, because what fun is that for you guys? Now you can make all sorts of decisions that may or may not be what I was hoping for. You guys will make the right decisions, though. I trust you. Please make the right decision. Anyways, on to more fun stuff. The first question of many. The first question, and yes, I said first, there actually has to be 2 questions this time, but we'll get to that later. The first question is, what farm type are we gonna have? Farm types in this are very important because it's a farming game, and if you choose a farm that you regret later, there's no changing it. You're stuck with it unless you want to make a new playthrough. And we don't want to do that, do we? So we need to carefully choose our farm type. Each of the 7 farms in Stardew Valley has its own benefit. This may be a skill, or multiple skills, or just the fact that it's huge, like the standard farm. Let's go into detail about each one to see what it offers. First up is the standard farm. It says on the wiki that it specializes in farming, and it does because it's got lots of open land, but it doesn't actually provide you with anything to help with this skill other than the open land. So it's essentially just a blank slate. Next is the Riverland farm. It's got a lot of water, which makes sense based off of the name, but that does mean that there's a lot less space for farming, and it's a little difficult to maneuver. But it's great for if we want to have crab pots. There's plenty of area for crab pots. And then we have the forest farm. This is a fairly good-sized farm, but not a lot of it is actually farming space. Most of it is grass where forage can spawn, so there's less space for crops, but you can still place buildings there. It also has a few renewing stumps that can provide us with hardwood every day once we upgrade our axe to copper. The less space means less crops, which means less wine, which means less income. So that's that option. And then there's the hilltop farm, or as I like to call it, the hilly farm, because it's not actually on top of a hill, it's more like there are hills in it, but that's besides the point. It's got an area almost like the quarry where rocks respawn every once in a while, which can be very good for gathering resources. However, it's hard to get to this quarry because of stumps and rocks and such. And it's also fairly hard to maneuver in general, a bit like the Riverland farm. You've got the amazing resources, but it's very hard to maneuver to get to these resources, and in the farm in general. It also doesn't have a lot of farming space, but I think that might be able to be worked around. I'm not quite sure. I haven't really done the hilltop farm before. And then we've got the wilderness farm, which is essentially the standard farm, but it was created originally to have monsters spawning on it, but now you can toggle that on and off for any of the farms, so it doesn't really have anything special about it except that it's slightly smaller, and more monsters will spawn if you have monster spawning enabled, but we'll get to that in a minute. It's a nice looking farm, and it's got quite a bit of water, so it might do, but it also is basically like the standard farm, but slightly smaller. So there's nothing that makes it too unique per se. And then there's the Four Corners farm. This one's interesting. It's like the Forest farm, the Hilltop farm, and the Riverland farm all combined into one, but it doesn't have the max amount of benefit as the others do. There's a tiny quarry, one renewing stump compared to the 8 of the Forest farm, and then an area where you're more likely to catch fish. There's not as much farming space as there are with the other options, but it does provide some benefits, but not a lot of them. So it's like little benefits, but even fewer downsides. And then last but not least, there is the beach farm. The beach farm is the largest of the 7 farms with over 4,600 tiles. That is more than 1,000 tiles more than the standard farm, which is supposed to be the big one. It's got supply crates, which are amazing. They can drop all sorts of different useful items. And there's good fishing and good forage on this farm. However, you can't use sprinklers except for a tiny little area on the farm. So that means you would be stuck hand watering everything until you clear that area out with an upgraded axe. It's also got a slightly awkward layout, being wider than most of the other farms, so it can be a little difficult to get from one side of the farm to the other. But otherwise, it's good. Some people hate it, some people love it. What do you guys think? The main income for each of these farms, for the standard farm, you'd get wine from all the space from the crops, and then you could also have several barns because of the open space. The Riverland farm would have plenty of space for crab pots, which means lots of sashimi, but less space for barns and crops to turn into wine. Forest farm has lots of supplies that would help us make tea saplings, which is also a good income, as well as some space for barns with a little bit of plants on the side. Hilltop farm, resources would probably have to be quite a bit of the income, or helping us get upgraded tools for better income. There's not a lot of space for barns on the Hilltop farm, maybe 1 or 2, but not very much, so wine would have to be better. The Wilderness farm is basically like the standard farm, wine and barns. Same for the Four Corners. The beach, we could not do as much wine unless we want to hand water, but the barns, we can fit a lot more barns on the beach farm. I saw a video where a guy had like 10 barns. It was crazy. So that's how that would go. And now for the second question. Are we going to have monster spawning on the farm or not? Ever since I believe it was the 1.5 update, you could choose for any farm if you want monster spawning on it. And monsters would come out around, I believe, 7 o'clock at night. And they don't provide any experience for combat, but they do give some pretty good resources. There's even a chance to get the living hat, which is the rarest hat in the game. However, there's also the fact that it would make it so that we can't exactly stay out as late on the farm, unless we want to get attacked by monsters, which could be good for practice for the Skull Caverns, because I'm not the greatest at combat, but it also would greatly hinder our farm tours if we need to wait until late at night. Of course, there is always staying up until 2 a.m. every day. Not that I would do that. So that's another important thing to think about that. So what do you guys think? Monster spawning on the farm or no? I think that about wraps it up. If you have any questions or want to answer the questions for this episode, please comment down below and make sure that you're subscribed. Thank you.